It's Eric alongside Rod. We're here. We're thrilled to be joined by Mike DeCourcy. He's a columnist for the Sporting News and he's been there since 1995. Wow, that's a long time.
Yes, it is.
He's a member of the United States Basketball Writers Hall of Fame and is a studio analyst at the Big Ten Network and an NCAA bracket analyst at Fox Sports. So, Mike, thanks so much for joining the Final Four on the schedule.
Oh, happy to do it. I love the name of your podcast. It's a really cool name.
Thanks so much. It's a mouthful. It makes it a little difficult sometimes for us, but yeah, it's great. Before we begin, I just want to remind people, if you want to support the show, you can head on over to thefinalfoursontheschedule.com, or if you're lazy, tffinots.com /support. You can find ways of giving one-time donations via PayPal or Venmo, or a recurring donation through Patreon. All right. So, Mike, we're going to obviously talk Michigan State hoops and just college hoops in general. We've been talking for a couple years now about the transformation of the college game with NIL and the transfer portal, as those have really changed things. And they seem to sort of at cross currents in some respects. You know, you have NIL, which tends to incentivize players to stick around a little bit longer. And so you have better talent at the college level playing. And yet at the same time, you have this transfer portal where you have players the ability to move a lot easier than before without losing eligibility. And so you have less consistency, less cohesion with teams. What do you feel about the overall quality of the game with those two sort of, changes battling each other?
You know, I'll be honest. I don't think that cohesion. I think that we've operated under this myth for years that teams that have veteran players are somehow more together than teams that do not. That's a falsity. That's a falsehood. It's a fiction that is romantic because it sounds great. Boy, if we have 4 seniors, 5 seniors, whatever, how great that'll be. What people don't always acknowledge or understand, and maybe that's because they haven't been close up like I have, is that no one has the same team from year to year, even if you have the same 5 players for 4 years in a row. Everybody changes. They change their games. They change their attitudes. And it's possible that from freshman to senior, your attitudes can get way better. Like everybody's like 100% on board now. That's a change. It's not the same team. It's a different team than it was the year before. Or the attitudes could get worse. It could be, I'm a senior. I'm not a pro yet. I need shots to get the NBA to look at me. And so your team changes that way. Every team changes from year to year. Every team changes from beginning to end. And so the idea, it's not that much work. We do it in every sport. I'm a Steelers fan. There are times in December when somebody will make a tackle and I'll be like, man, I've been watching these guys all year. Who's number 28 or whatever? I mean, it happens because guys, get hurt and then subbed in. But do I say, oh gosh, I'm not a Steelers fan anymore because I don't know who number 28 is. Where did he come from? It's this thing that every time something changes in sports, we have to rebel against it. There are things that I don't embrace, that I don't love about the transfer concept, but none of them have to do with the game. It all has to do whether it's the right thing for the player's education. As long as they're graduating, and I saw a picture today with John Calipari from Kentucky, with the Kentucky basketball program's graduates. There are 4, I think, and there were 3 in the picture. And one of them was Xavier Wheeler, transfer from Georgia. He's in. He made it. The other, C.J. Frederick, transfer from Iowa. He made it. So as long as that's happening, I don't care at all. I don't care at all if players change teams. Now, sometimes that's going to be for better, and sometimes, and I mean for the better of the player. They're going to get a better opportunity. They're going to get more spotlight. They're going to get to play in the show, whatever it might be. And sometimes it's going to be for the worse. They're going to get less playing time than they thought. They're going to like their coach less than they like the one that they just got done playing for, but they won't know that until they go through, 20 practices or whatever, and you can't turn around and go back. But I just don't think it hurts the game. I just covered a Final Four in which the literally most together team I've ever covered at the Final Four. I've done 33 Final Fours. I don't think I ever saw a team with less ego than San Diego State 2022-23. That team did not care who was on the floor. That team wanted to win no matter what. They played 9 players. None of them averaged 13 points a game. None of them averaged 30 minutes, I believe. And they were as together as could be. So I don't buy that hurts. I think that the element of NIL makes it better. I mean, Hunter Dickinson's not a college basketball player anymore. And since it's a Michigan State podcast, you can be happy that he's still a player, but he's not playing against you every time. He's not a college player anymore without it. Oscar Tshiebwe certainly wouldn't have played this past year, and right. He's probably going to play next year. He'd be gone. I mean, we're getting more quality players back for more time, because what we don't see as much, we still see it too much. And this is where it really hits home for Michigan State. The player who goes and takes first round talent and spends it on being in the second round. And that happened to the Spartans a year ago. That's the thing that is bad for college basketball. But I suspect we're seeing it less now than we saw it prior to name, image, and likeness.
Do you think, like, what happened in the Big Ten last year, you had a lot, you could just say a lot of parity. You had a lot of teams that were totally reconstructed, like Illinois, Ohio State. There's some teams that were, mostly transfers, or at least a large percentage of their players. Do you think that contributed a little bit to just the jumbled up nature of the league? Or do you think that was just kind of just random sort of confluence of other factors?
I think what it contributed to was the fact that it was as competitive as it was. Because if Illinois hadn't the ability to go into the transfer portal and go get some talented players. Now, I think we all can acknowledge that there was not a great function on that team.
Right.
But without the talent, they probably would have been a far under 500 team, both certainly in league and probably overall. So instead they were highly competitive. Penn State was able to be highly competitive and highly competitive in league play, make the tournament final, play UCLA, play Texas to a tremendous second round game. They would not have been an NCAA tournament a year ago. So I think that's what happened, is that concept allowed more teams in the league to be competitive. And instead of it being a down year for the Big Ten, it was a highly competitive year that produced 8 tournament bids, could have produced 9, and it a very compelling regular season. Not great March performance, but that they were not slated to have great March performance. They were supposed to lose all but 2 of their second round games, and they lost all but 1 of them.
Right. At this time last year, there was a lot of talk swirling. I think mostly the impetus was the move of USC and UCLA to the Big Ten. You started to see a lot of discussion about the high major conferences moving from the NCAA, creating some new governing institution outside of that structure. I remember Jack Swarbuck from Notre Dame was quoted on that subject, that he seemed to think it was more or less inevitable at some point over the next, say, decade. Do you think that's coming? And I know it's mostly football driven, but I guess the other aspect of it is, if it does come, what do you think that means for the future of the NCAA basketball tournament?
I think first, what you are describing, and I spoke to a number of people, high-level athletic directors, who fully expected around this time last year for the football element, not all the high major conferences, but actually, as it was described to me by multiple athletic directors, not just the high majors, not just the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, but also the other that play 1A football. And they were talking about moving 1A football to a separate platform. It really, in many ways, already is. All the NCAA does relative to 1A football, and I'm going to call it 1A. I hate that other term, 1A football. All that it does is playing rules, eligibility, That's it. It doesn't run the championship. The
Right.
championship is run differently. So it really wouldn't be that significant a difference. But this is what I've argued for decades now. I think at least a decade. What I've said is that what people don't understand and appreciate about the NCAA is its number one service to the membership, to the Division I membership, is the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Running that produces great wealth for the members.
Sure.
That's number one. Number two, liability shield. Nobody ever talks about this.
Yeah.
But when people get mad about something that's happening in college athletics, I mean, they don't go sue some low major school that, is barely making ends meet in their Division I program. No, they go after the NCAA. So go ahead, take football. Hey, no lawsuits in football ever, and put that on a separate platform. And then what happens? Well, now they're coming after you. There's no NCAA and NCAA basketball tournament to shield the liability, so to speak. And so they're coming after you and what your football tournament makes. And that's exactly what you don't want. So I don't think we'll see this happening in a long time. When people talk about them all moving to a new organization, here's what they also miss. Who do you think makes the rules for the one you don't like? Who do you think makes sure that the rules that you don't like are enforced? It's the members. Well, so the members would go off and create another organization. What would it look like? It would look exactly like the NCAA. They might have headquarters in West Palm Beach so you get more sun if you go visit or whatever. But it wouldn't make any difference in terms of how sports are governed. This is what they want. So a lot of people who talk about this, and not everybody who talks about this, but a lot of people who talk about this don't understand the concept. It's people who don't cover college athletics in the media that thoroughly and just sort of poke their nose in and say, hey, everybody's going to leave. And sometimes it's coaches who don't understand. They understand better than anybody how to run a pick and roll, but they don't understand necessarily the enterprise in which they're involved.
So just to push back just a little bit on that, and I think that's a really interesting take. The thing that you often see suggested in media coverage around this is that the fundamental problem the high majors have is that, or high level D1 programs, is that they see their interests being outvoted essentially by the myriad number of smaller schools who have very different perspectives, very different needs in a lot of these areas. You don't see that as something that's sufficient to drive the kind of move that people have suggested is coming.
The autonomy concept, and how the Power Five became codified, it's nearly 10 years old now. I mean, they don't get to make the rules on everything, but they get to make the rules that on everything that matters to them. I mean, that's where, for instance, I'm trying to think of what the first big thing, cost of attendance. That was a autonomy conference rule. Now, they're not the only ones that pay it, because all the other leagues said they're going to pay it, we got to pay it, or we don't get any of those players. They're probably not getting very many of them anyway, but they wanted to stay competitive. So most of the schools chose to pay cost of attendance. But that's an example of a rule that they passed through as the autonomy group. Do they have full autonomy? No, but they have enough autonomy that they're not being highly constrained. I think they at times feel like they're being constrained in football, and that's why there was talk about that a year ago. But I was really intrigued by how quickly that talk died. As we got into the football season, we got into the fall, and all of a sudden nobody's talking about that. And I am convinced that it's the liability shield argument that led them to draw back from it. That again, they sue in football all the time over lots of things. It's a collision sport. A lot of players get hurt. And so you've got to be protected from that. And the only place to get the protection, there's two places. There's one right now, which is the NCAA men's basketball tournament. And then when they put into place the college football playoff as a legitimate tournament that generates much more revenue than it is now, then there'll be that revenue. Well, as I said, they're getting that. They're going to get that revenue, and I don't think they want to just start throwing it out the window in defending lawsuits or settling them.
Right. No, it's an interesting perspective. I guess one more quick related offshoot of that. We've seen a lot of talking from high major associated people about expansion of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Do you think that's coming?
I guess it depends in what form we're talking. I think it's going to be hard to hold back an expansion to a first 8, maybe. I guess I don't know if we'd call it that. But the first 4 concept, I think, is likely to be doubled in size relatively soon. I don't know what the time frame is on that. I hope that I never have to cover one of those. I want the tournament to stay as it is. I've been doing the brackets now for Fox for 4 years. One of them, there was no tournament, but then for the 3 years we've had tournaments. And as I've gone through those and reached fruition with the last 3, I mean, they're just, other than the mistakes that the committee makes, like Rutgers this year, there aren't tournament teams out there that are missing. They're not there.
Right.
And what's happening is, because is expansion to extremes it happened already in the ACC, and it will happen soon in the SEC and the Big Ten. And when I mean extremes, I mean they're getting up to 15 members already in the ACC. There will be 16 in the Big Ten and SEC within a couple of years.
Right.
There's concern that there won't be enough bids for all those teams. And the reality is that the Big East's performance in 2011 shows that's nonsense. The Big Ten's performance over the last 3 years, 9, 9, 8, could have been 9, 3 years in a row. And it would have been 10 if we had a 2020 tournament. It would have been minimum 9 there. They would have had to stick it to Indiana the way they did to Rutgers this year. So that would have been 4 consecutive years of 8 or more bids. How did they get them? They played good basketball. They won out of conference games. No more complicated than that. SEC, 8 bids this year. Why? They played good basketball. They won a lot of games. Big 12, 70% of their membership. Same concept. So I don't buy that you need to have another 4 bids so that the SEC, which I believe is the biggest, our most ardent advocate of this,
yes,
so the SEC can get enough bids. Play good basketball like you did this year. 2 thumbs up on the SEC's performance this year. Loved it. Do it again. You'll keep getting those number of bids.
You kind of alluded earlier to the Big Ten's performance in the NCAA tournament, and I think there's always a lot of talk about, especially the last few years, the lack of success in the NCAA tournament in the sense of national championship. I mean, the last champion was Michigan State Spartans in 2000. That's 23 years ago. It'd be 24 years next year, and so is this a fluke? Because Big Ten seems to perform pretty well. I mean, they make plenty of Final Fours, number of national championship games as well. Just hasn't won the whole thing, but. Do you think it's like the wrong kind of basketball being played, or do you think it's just a random sort of confluence of just random stuff that just is happening?
I mean, in some cases, there's been bad luck, and that happens. It can be bad luck, like happened to Purdue in 2011, I believe it was, when Robbie Hummel was injured. Purdue was in the team picture of the best team in the country that year. Ohio State was really good. We ended up with a champion that wasn't the best team in the country. Connecticut was not the best team. They were the champ. No one's taken away from them. But certainly, if Purdue had been able to go into that tournament healthy, they very well could have won. They did not. The bad luck could be a matchup like 2018. What did it take to take down Michigan State? That zone defense that Syracuse played. They played anybody else that was, I think the Spartans were 3 and Syracuse was a 6. Any other 6 seed, they win. They were much better, but the zone screwed them up, and Tom should have played Jaren Jackson more, and on and on and on, and they lose. And then there's bad luck, like happened to Michigan in the 2013 championship game, when Trey Burke tracks down Peyton Siva on a breakaway with the little right around 5 minutes left, and rejects a shot, rejects a layup. One of the really great defensive plays that we've seen in the Final Four, and it gets called a foul because the guy blew the call. And so instead of the ball goes to the Wolverines, and the game favors the final 5 minutes favor UM. Instead, it's more lead security for Louisville. So bad luck happens. Sometimes, bad decisions happen. I mean, I don't think that Matt Painter has coached the Boilermakers effectively in the last two tournaments. I think he's a phenomenal coach. I think he's one of the 2 or 3 or 4 best coaches in college basketball. But I think he's been too adherent to the idea of this is who we are in the last 2 tournaments. Then we got to survive tonight, and then we'll worry about who we are on Saturday or Sunday. That's the thing that they've got to get to at Purdue. One of the things I have theorized about the Big Ten, and I use a baseball analogy. In order to survive in the Big Ten, because the competition is so deep and it's every night and you don't get nights off, many, if any, is that you become like a major league pitcher who has to throw fastballs and sliders, and you have to hit fastballs and sliders. So you got to tune yourself in to hitting fastballs and sliders. And then you get in the NCAA tournament, and now you're seeing knuckleballs. You're seeing off-speed pitches.
Yep.
And you have to react to that. And that didn't happen for the Boilers in the last 2. So I'm not going to blame it all on bad luck, but I think when you look at the championship drought, that's largely what it is. I think when you look at the last 3 seasons, the 9, 9, and 8, and no Final Four teams, and relatively few Sweet 16 teams and Elite 8 teams, I think that that's a totally different discussion. 2021, agreed. Different from 22, different from 23. 21 was a failure. I won't even call it a disappointment. When you have a 1 that doesn't get out of the first weekend, a 2 that doesn't get out of the first weekend, and a 3 that doesn't get out of the first weekend, all at the same time, and then your other one goes to the Elite 8 and loses to a 12 seed or 11 seed, UCLA, that's a failure. But the last 2 years go to a disappointment a year ago to this year. I think they basically performed as they were expected to, with the exception of the Boilers.
Just as a follow on to your baseball analogy, because I like that as a descriptor of what's gone on over the last 3 years in particular. It's been our feeling, and we've talked about it a lot on this podcast, that the Big Ten has been very unique in terms of its roster construction at the top of the league. You've had so many of these truly giant centers in a way that you have not seen really in any other conference. Garza, Coburn, Edey, Dickinson. I mean, I'm missing some too, in addition to the frontline guys. And it's been our observation that when you have a guy like that, they tend to be the center of gravity to everything you do. And that can make it harder to throw those knuckleballs or to handle a knuckleball that somebody else is throwing at you. Do you think there's anything to that? Do you think maybe Big Ten teams, at least some of them, maybe need to think about roster construction a little differently to better position themselves for March success?
Look,
when you do have to be more versatile.
I mean, I think that there's something to that, but I don't think it's in the area that you're talking about. I think you look at a year ago, and David McCormick is the best player for Kansas at the Final Four. Didn't get the most outstanding player of the year award. And I went back over the numbers because I was writing about Hunter going to KU.
I read your article today. Yeah.
and I'm like, wait a second, this is even worse than I remembered it being. Because I knew Ochai hadn't had a very good championship game, Ochai Agbaji, that was named MVP. And I went back and I'm like, this is even worse than I remember. No, I think the big guys still help you win championships. You have to have them. Now, the specific nature of them, obviously Kofi, there were things he couldn't do well, and they had to work around that at times. And that's true for Zach. I mean, ball screen defense, how do they run that? But again, 2 years in a row, you had a center at the heart of the championship team. And in UConn's case, it was really two. I mean, they were 40 minutes of great center play between Sonogo and Donovan Clingan. But I do think that you could use more dynamic wings. And again, this is where, Caleb Houston going pro after a year and not being a first round pick, and I thought he was a lottery talent and he wastes it on being a second rounder. Max Christie hitting close to home, should have played for the Spartans this year. If he plays for the Spartans, they're a different team. They're now they go from having a great 3-person guard core to having the best 4-person guard core in the nation. And it's a difference. And you're maybe, instead of losing in the Sweet 16, you're in the Final Four. Losing Max, and Max was a first-team All-America candidate if he comes back. And if he had been the 20th pick in the draft, man, go. But go to be a second rounder, that's the thing that really hurt the Big Ten this year in terms of its March ambitions. They managed, like I said, because of the transfer portal and immediate eligibility, managed to remain a highly competitive league. But losing those 3 players, Moussa Diabate, the other one from Michigan, losing those 3 players took Michigan down to a non-tournament team from a team that would have been a top 10 team, and took the Spartans from a terrific, overachiever, down from a team that would have been, again, a top 10 level team, down to a terrific overachiever to make the Sweet 16.
Okay. So talking about Michigan State specifically, as we look at next year, and we're making the assumption for now, at least, that Jaden Akins and AJ Hoggard are back. What do you think about the potential of that team, Hattie? And I'm not asking you to put them in a ranking spot, because it's all, we see yesterday, Hunter Dickinson deciding where he's going changes a lot of that around, right? But just overall, do you feel that they're a legitimate national title Final Four contender heading into next season, based on how the roster appears to be set and what else is happening nationally?
Yeah, with those 2 players, and then you bring in Xavier Booker to make yourself deeper and more talented in the post. At that point, I think you are a national championship contender, a top 10 team. And I think any team that goes in with a top 10 team with a future pro like Xavier would appear to be, any team in that circumstance is a national championship contender. I mean, remember, UConn wasn't preseason number 1. They weren't. They were I think they came into the tournament as a 4 seed. I had them as a 3, so they were between the top 12 and top 16 teams in the country by the end of the year, not just the beginning. So I think if you're a team like Michigan State that's going to be projected as a top 10, presuming AJ and Jaden are back, I think they have a great shot. And they obviously have a coach who knows how to win in March, took out the dual Big East champions. I think that's an underrated achievement, because, again, we talked about the Big Ten and its lack of achievement in March. Some of the narrative about that is from people who don't like the Big Ten. I mean, that's
of course you're preaching to the converted on that one.
But I think it's worth saying. I mean, anytime I defend the Big Ten just based on facts, and again, I'm not defending 21, and I'm being truthful about 22 and 23. But I'm also going back. When people say they always lose in March, I'm like, wait a second now. I mean, we over the course of this century, we've had more Big Ten teams in the Final Four than pretty much any other league.
Right.
I mean, I don't have the exact numbers now because I haven't done them in a while, but they were, prior to this season, more Final Four teams than any other league. I don't know if that's changed. It hasn't, because I don't think Conference USA has had that many Final Four teams in the last years.
No.
So
West,
I think that's still probably true. And they've been second in terms of victories to the ACC. But obviously the ACC with North Carolina and Duke has won many more championships. And Kansas has won multiple championships, and then you also add in Baylor in the Big 12. So they've won more championships, but the Big Ten has been performing in the tournament up until this 3-year window. They just haven't been able to get that final game.
Well, I mean, the league's had over that since 2000, so this century, 6 times the Big Ten has had a national finalist. Tom Izzo's got 8 Final Fours himself, 7 of which have happened this century. Yeah, it's a foolish thing to try to argue that the Big Ten doesn't ever succeed.
Right.
I guess it just depends as your ultimate criterion. Are you winning the championship, or are you performing well? Are you winning regionals, that kind of thing? And those are maybe 2 different discussions.
Yeah, but I think if you define it only by winning the championship, then you could have a league with one great team and everybody else could stink. And is that a great league?
Right. Of course not.
So yeah, that's why I can't define it just based on the identity of the champion. I think maybe you get extra bonus points for winning that, but it's about the collective, what the winning percentage, advancement, Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, et cetera. And then obviously you certainly want to win it. I mean, I know no one in the Big Ten is happy about that 23-year drought. But I made a joke that Twitter didn't love when they were talking about that, and pointed out, hey, Maryland won one and they're in the league.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's 2. I don't know. Twitter did not love that joke.
We'll get a big boost in another year or so in overall national titles with UCLA joints.
There you go.
So before we hit, Rod's got a bunch of rapid fire questions to kind of close things out here, but I just want to remind everyone, if you're watching on YouTube, you can definitely see my awesome shirt. There's a logo shirt through Nudge Printing. You go to nudgeprinting.com. Super comfortable. This is the one I used to win the free throw competition, which Mike doesn't know anything about. I actually won trip for 2 to the Final Four this season at shooting free throws at the Breslin. Wearing these shirts, go to nudgeprinting.com, Final Four, in the coupon code to get 20% off your order. You can get hoodies, all sorts of Spartan gear, other Michigan schools, high quality stuff. They were also instrumental in the Spartan Strong effort, where they raised $155,000 for the shooting victims at Michigan State, printing, I think, over 15,000 shirts. So check out Gabe and Brittany at nudgeprinting.com. And if you want to get this shirt or the hoodie, that you can go to go to finalfoursontheschedule.com/merchandise, and you can find the link there and buy that and get any other stuff you want. All right. So Rod, I'll turn it over to you to hit Mike with a bunch of quick questions here.
To close us out, just some rapid fire questions, since you're a long time observer of the sport. I wanted to get your perspective on some of these things. What's the best college team you've ever seen?
Well, I mean, I think you have to divide that into 2 things. One, the best college team I've ever covered, so therefore been in the gym with.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, 1996 Kentucky. They were ridiculously talented. They had 9 pros, 8 to 9 pros on their team. You're talking Ron Mercer. You're talking Antoine Walker, Walter McCarty, Derek Anderson. It was a ridiculously talented team, and they were very together. They were great on both ends of the floor.
Okay. So you weren't quite in your sporting news position with the 90-91 UNLV group then.
I was.
Would you okay, so you would take 96 Kentucky over those teams?
Well, I first, I was not at Sporting News then, but I was covering for the Pittsburgh Press. So
okay,
I was at the Final Four in 88 and 90 for the Press, 91, 92 as well. The 90 team, it gets sort of a grace period because 91 became so great. The 90 UNLV team was not a great team. I mean, by in the historical standards, like 92 Duke, 96 Kentucky, the UCLA, some of the best UCLA teams, doesn't fit into the conversation. They lost 5 games that year. They were not favored to win the national championship. The 91 team, okay, if they win it, yeah, maybe we're talking about them, but they didn't. No, you don't get to be in this conversation if you don't win it. You get to be in the conversation. You get to be the number 1 team that never won it. And that's probably what the Rebels are.
That's my next question. The best team you've seen to not win a national title?
Oh, that's the easiest question because it's not even close. I mean, they are laps ahead of, again, in coverage. You go back to 74 UCLA and teams like that. I'm watching on TV. I'm a teenager. I can't say that I really,
Right.
and I didn't totally understand Bill Walton, even though I watched him play and watched him do great things. I didn't really totally understand him until I got to be a pro and started to understand the game more. So I'd like to keep those kinds of superlatives too when I cover the sport.
We don't understand Bill Walton's commentary either. So
I still don't understand that.
Best collegiate player that you've seen. So while in college, the guy who was best, non-NBA division.
Another easy one, because that is Christian Laettner. I did a book 20 years ago now on the top 100 college basketball players in history. There'd be a few more. There'd be a few switched around from those 20 years. But 20 years ago, Christian Laettner was ranked number 9. I don't think anybody from the last 20 years would crack the top 10 and pass him. He was, his name is up there with Elvin Hayes and Larry Bird, Oscar Robertson, Bill Russell. He's behind those guys, but he's in that category. Phenomenal player in college.
Right. Best Michigan State player not named Magic Johnson.
Wow.
That's a tough one for us. I can tell you that.
This is on his Sparty career and not anything after. That's Mateen. Mateen was in my book. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen a player who owned the game the way he did. It may be, again, in my career of covering, which began in '88, I saw team players that were more spectacular, but he dominated every game in which he played at both ends of the floor. He was tremendous, and I think it's because he didn't become a great pro. And because he wasn't statistically great, I think his greatness is one of those things that could be easily forgotten. But hey, when you talk about that 23-year absence, the reason it's 23 and not whatever beyond that is Mateen Cleaves.
For sure. I actually just had this discussion brought up for the umpteenth time again a few days ago. What people who only saw him at Michigan State and in the NBA don't realize is prior to his rollover accident, when he was on a visit with Michigan, if you saw him, and I don't know whether you ever saw Mateen in AAU or when he was in high school, but he was robbed of phenomenal athleticism that he just wasn't physically in that same condition. Had he remained healthy, he would have been an entirely different player from even the one that we saw, as great as he was. It's really sad to think about, because I remember seeing him win the state championship as a junior, and he was phenomenal. He was doing things that guys like Baron Davis did athletically, and you just never saw that at MSU, and yet he was still great.
Yeah, but I would say, Mateen, who I know and like a lot, and we did some work together on BTN, and he is just an absolute pleasure. If he had all that, what you just described, then we would be talking about a longer drought, because he would not have been.
He wouldn't have lasted 4 years. Yeah.
No way. No way.
No, I agree. I think he would have been one and done. Honestly, he was that impressive athletically.
There you go. So it changed Tom's career and Michigan State's program.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all I had, Eric. So Mike, we want to thank you so much for doing this. Greatly appreciated. It was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been absolutely all our pleasure. What's a good way for people to follow your work and to keep track of you?
Yeah, at TSN Mike on Twitter. You can go directly to sportingnews.com. And I will say that, and we haven't launched it yet, but be on the lookout for, we're going to begin doing an email newsletter that links to a lot of our top work. That's going to start relatively soon. It's in beta testing now. And there are others that do that. And it's a really cool way of having the day's articles condensed. Today's test, for instance, had my article up that I mentioned about Hunter Dickinson linked to that. And so and again, that's free of charge. That's the thing. I was speaking with an old friend at dinner last night, and his daughter is getting a PhD from IU today. Their daughter, the Marie and Steve's daughter, she's getting a PhD today, and we were having dinner, and he said, "I never run into a paywall on your site." And I said, That's because we don't ask you to pay. That's the thing. You get all our content, and we cover, this is worldwide. We cover soccer. We cover NBA at a high level. We have many NBA writers. We have college basketball with me. We have college football with Bill Bender, baseball with Ryan Fagan, Vinny Iyer on NFL, and many other NFL writers. And we get all that. Everybody gets all of that for free. It doesn't cost you a dime. So sportingnews.com, if you want to read that content, and you can follow me at TSN Mike on Twitter. And obviously college basketball, general columns. I'll be covering the Women's World Cup from home this July. So all of that's available, again, free of charge. It doesn't cost you a nickel. Other sports sites, and I'm not going to say that I'm not going to denigrate them because I pay for them as well, but it doesn't cost you a dime to go to sportingnews.com and read all our content.
Well, just like us, we're not behind a paywall either. We just we rely on our advertisers and our fans for supporting your show. So Mike DeCourcy from Sporting News and from Big Ten Network, we'll enjoy watching you again this season in the studio. And thanks so much for joining us. The Final Four is on the schedule. And until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.